Okay, so I think that I am live with Joshua. I'm
We
just
are.
asking in the chat if anybody can hear me. If you can see me, my apologies for this, like hair, etc. But that will all sort itself out apparently. So, yeah, this is going to be problematic, but it's definitely live for sure. So, I don't know. Hopefully, everybody knows Joshua. They won't know the video from my channel yet, but from the main SOCO channel, he's also discussed lots of times various issues with Paperboy. And yeah, so we are going to continue, and I will put the link in the description box eventually to our first discussion where we were working towards Satan, although not the way that sounds, but just theologically getting to a Jewish perspective on Satan as opposed to a Christian one. And I'm going to shut up waffling and welcome Joshua to the live stream. Hello.
Hello. Thank you.
Right. So, with that, I think part of our discussion, you mentioned that you weren't very familiar with demons in the Bible because we went from Eden and then we were trying to progress to what and who Satan is, whether he's even the source of any badness, whether it's with, like what's going on basically, Josh. I'd like to know the Jewish perspective on, we can start with demons and work our way up, I guess.
All right then. So I found some very interesting things about demons. The earliest source, at least according to the rabbis, as to demons in the Hebrew Bible, is in Leviticus chapter 17, verse 7. There, the verse says, "V'lo yizbechu od zivcheihem," they shall no longer slaughter their offerings, laseirim, to the goats, asherhem zonim acherehem, that they are straying after them. Chukas olam tihyazos lehem l'dorasom. This is an eternal decree for them, for their generations. So it says, they shall no longer slaughter their offerings to the goats. Now, for some reason, all of the commentaries that I've seen explain that this idea of slaughtering offerings to goats is specific. It is actually nothing to do with goats. It's talking about a type of demon that a lot of pagans in the olden days used to slaughter animals to these demons, and they were known as seirim, which means wild goats. And according to various commentaries that I've seen, it's because people who would be loyal to these demons would the demons would appear to them like wild goats, which is interesting. Which is
Yeah,
why they
so
referenced here as that. That's the first thing.
I just thought of Baphomet, obviously, I think, when you spoke about that, because I think in the Church of Satan in California, Satan is represented by a Baphomet, the goat-headed pentagram kind of dude. Also, I guess I'll bring up here that in Isaiah, the pagan idols, obviously they're not God. We know that from the Shema even, but that Paul goes on to say, and referencing Isaiah, he says that, where are we? What does he say? He says, "Therefore, my dear friends, flee from idolatry. I speak to sensible people. Judge for yourselves what I say. Is not the cup of thanksgiving for which we give thanks a participation in the blood of Christ?" He goes on a little bit about stuff. And then he says, "Consider the people of Israel. Do not those who eat the sacrifices participate in the altar. Do I mean then that a sacrifice offered to an idol is anything, or that an idol is anything? No. But the sacrifices of pagans are offered to demons and not to God. I do not want you to be participants with demons." So I guess at this stage, I'll suggest that any pagan idols that are referenced all the way throughout the Old Testament, that's evidence of at least worship of demons, not necessarily the demons themselves.
That is interesting, because I remember learning a number of years ago some rabbinic commentary from I don't know, maybe 800 years ago or something, that that actually explains that all of the references to idol worship, that they actually had some sort of power, these idols, because they were in fact these types of angel or demon type of force, this type of spiritual being. And the way I had it explained to me back in school was that it's kind of like somebody is trying to hack the system, right? You have a computer, you have the program, the way that things are supposed to work, right? The way it's supposed to work is you're supposed to do what God tells you, and and that is supposed to open up some sort of thing in heaven that will bestow down blessing to the earth. But there's a way of hacking the system where you can go round, that God has made this way that you're able to hack the system and go to these strange spiritual forces, whatever we may call them, and that seems to be what one of the big problems of idolatry is. It's something about hacking the system, which is why we see various times that worshipping the idols seems to actually do something.
I see, yeah. So I also would then attribute the dark magicians in Egypt, whom God challenges with like he lets Moses pretend to be, someone who can turn sticks and snakes and interchange them. I guess. So I don't know how canonical Judaism is. I don't really know. I think I do know, but I think there are probably schools of thought that accept more as authoritative, like extra biblical, like mysticism or esoteric. I don't know, like old Jewish writings. Because if I'm right, I think that Lilith may be referenced as the first or the queen of, or something along those lines. But I think she's got a human origin. So that would be because God references creating the angels, but he doesn't say, I mean, Islam believes that Satan or Iblis created the demons in a very anatomically interesting and possibly X-rated way. I'm surprised. But yeah, I don't recall the process of how a demon comes into existence in the first place being explicitly referenced, and the live chat can correct me if I'm wrong, and you can also.
So I haven't seen that either explicitly. I have seen Lilith, and she is hinted at in Isaiah chapter 34, verse. I've got it here. Hold on. Verse.
There's also a Hebrew word which is similar, like not to be confused with. I remember when I was just sort of reading up on her.
Yeah, chapter Isaiah 34, verse 14. So there it mentions various animals, and one of the animals mentioned is in Hebrew the word Lilith, and some commentaries take it in the simple meaning, which is that it's the name of some sort of winged animal. However, some of the most classical commentaries, like for example Rashi I see here, and various others, explain that this Lilith is the mother of all the demons. She is called a Shador, which is a female demon, and she's the mother of all demons. And I saw various rabbinic, quite esoteric sources that talk about how before Adam was presented with Eve, he had been given Lilith to have children with, and that's where the demons may have come from, according to a few sources that I saw earlier.
Yeah, I've got here, it says the Masoretic text, and then there's some very lovely looking Hebrew writing, which could just be a pamphlet, I know. But the translation is 34:14. It says, and shall meet wild cats with jackals, the goat, which I thought was quite interesting, because if that's like an allegory for, I guess, male demons, he calls his fellow Lilith. She rests and she finds rest. There she shall nest, the great owl, and she lays eggs and she hatches. Sounds.
Yes. Yeah. So there's some that translate Lilith as some sort of winged animal, and I forget what it is because I don't have the English here.
Yeah.
But
Liliot,
most of the commentaries do say the mother of the demons. Sorry, that's who Lilith is.
Right. So I wonder, I guess because it's not in the Bible, if it depends, I guess. If she truly is how she's described in those texts, it's possible that the propaganda, her backstory, I don't know what to call it, could be demonically influenced in the first place. And obviously, I don't recall God ever mentioning that He created another first female, or proposed wife.
So one thing I did find was a drush made. A drush is kind of like an eisegesis, like some sort of influence that the rabbis do. I've talked about this a few times with Paperboy. That in Genesis chapter 5, verse 1, it says that Adam begot a son in his image, like in his likeness, right? And the inference that the drush that some rabbis make, and I can't remember the source, see if I can find it, was that yes, it's this is brought in tractate in the Babylonian Talmud in Eruvin 18b. So it says there, Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar said, all those years during which Adam was ostracized for the sin involving the tree of knowledge, he bore spirits, demons, and female demons, as it is stated, and Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth. By inference, until now, the age of 130, he did not bear after his image, but rather bore other creatures. That is one source that I found about this.
I have another source just popped to my mind, and I do remember arguing with Paperboy about it, funnily enough. But so what I did is I went through the Bible and I looked for any references to other writings and other stories that everybody else seemed to know what was being referenced, but they're not included in the canon. And there's one that is the story of Adam and Eve after their expulsion. That is definitely a Jewish, like early-ish Jewish text. And that, the odd thing about that, because the discussion I was having was surrounding Satan's involvement in potentially Cain, because Cain obviously becomes the first murderer, and Satan is a murderer and a liar from the beginning, as it were. But in that extra biblical story, obviously, it says that when Cain was born, his face was glowing and he jumped up and ran off and got some food for Eve, as one does when one can like fully walk and run as an infant. But it doesn't mention Lilith again, and it does mention Adam and Eve by the time of Adam's death, I believe, having, I think, thousands at least of descendants within those times. So I guess I could do some more research on that, although I don't know who I'd trust. If it's not in the Bible, it's kind of, I don't know, a little bit dicey. So we've covered potentially are you saying, is whoever you're quoting saying that Adam is the father of all living,
Well, he doesn't say all, but he does.
Not all, I mean human, spiritual, and other than angels.
So he certainly does say that he bore spirits, demons, and female demons. He doesn't say all, so I don't know. That seems to be the only.
But the inference is not with Eve, then, I guess. But Seth is referenced in the Bible as being Eve's child, for sure.
So I had seen another source, I can't find it now, that Lilith was this female demon who Adam had bore these demons with. So it would mean that
I will definitely go and research it, because I don't know why I thought it. Maybe it was an assumption on my part, but I thought she started off as a created human and then descended, it was transformed by either sin or, I don't know why. I guess I just thought, well, these are the only created beings and only angels and humans.
I haven't heard that. I haven't seen that in any of the sources that I've seen. Obviously, there are a multitude of different sources that I have not seen, because there's just so much out there. But in terms of what I've seen, she's always just called a Shador, which is a female demon. She's called the mother of the demons. So she would obviously be a created being, obviously,
I
right?
know, but I meant like within the remit of the
But,
6 days of create. Do you know what I mean? Like in
so,
that
yes,
time.
so she's not. So being a demon, she would not be a human, obviously, but she's also not an angel. One of the main sources, one of the most well-known sources in rabbinic literature about demons in general that I found is in the Talmud in Tractate Hagiga, page 16a. I can just get that up. It says there that, it says 6 statements, the sages taught 6 statements were said with regards to demons. In 3 ways they are like ministering angels, and in 3 ways they are like humans. In 3 ways they are like ministering angels as follows: they have wings like ministering angels, and they fly from one end of the world to the other like ministering angels, and they know what will be in the future like ministering angels. Should it enter your mind that they know the future? Not even the angels are privy to the future. Rather, they hear from behind the curtain when God reveals something of the future, just like ministering angels. And in 3 ways, they are similar to humans. They eat and drink like humans, they multiply like humans, and they die like humans.
Okay, but that still doesn't, because it just crossed my mind that the train of thought I'm going on is definitely heretical, I guess. I don't know if anyone's ever discussed it too much, but if it's, so it implies that if she's not a human who falls, as it were, into like some serious problem, if she's the origin of demons, the mother, not a mother, the mother of demons, her creation would have been like she's not born of demons, she would have been created from scratch, or from a rib. And I don't know how many ribs Adam had to spare, but the thing is that I don't think that I believe God created demons specifically, like unless it was part of the curse, but it's not she didn't just pop up, I guess.
So you would believe that she's uncreated?
No, I think she must have been created a human, or I don't think God specifically set out. He created angels, yes, with a purpose, and he created humanity with a purpose. But I don't remember around 3. Like, I don't believe he then set out to create, like, depending on the timeline, Satan the serpent had yet to be cursed. Like, the introduction of free will and the knowledge of good and evil hadn't really occurred yet, if the Talmudic or the Masoretic is saying it was prior to Eve. If it's Seth, then that's after Eve's, like Eve is. Do you see what I mean? I'd have to check the timeline.
So as far as I've seen, Lilith was created before Adam. What I found here,
an older woman. Wow. Yeah.
One of the earlier rabbinic sources is a Mishnah in Tractate Ovos, the Tractate of the Fathers, which says, if you hold on 1 second, where is it?
Somebody in the chat is saying that in Enoch. Oh, sorry, Karen.
Sorry?
Now, somebody in the chat just said in the book of Enoch, it references angels who spliced creatures and therefore created abominations.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
What I do know is that in Tractate Ovos it mentions that harmful spirits were one of the things, at least according to one opinion, that were created Bein Hashmoshes, which is the time in between sundown and nightfall on the 6th day of creation.
Right, so post Adam then.
So that would be, that might be, yeah, that would be post Adam, in fact, because there's a list of things that the
unless her creation is among the animals. If she's referenced as a winged somebody, like an analogy or a metaphor, then she could fall. That would counter what you just said, though, actually. But yeah, she could have slipped in with the animals, as it were. I don't really.
So I don't recall seeing anyone that any of the rabbis that identify Lilith as one of these harmful spirits.
Mm-hmm.
So it says here, here's the I've got it up now. This Mishnah in Avot, it says 10 things were created on the eve of the Sabbath at twilight. So this is the eve of the 7th day of creation, right? The 6th day of creation, right? Just before the end. And these are they: the mouth of the earth, which is the thing that swallowed up Korah and his the rest of the people who were rebelling in the desert. The mouth of the well, this is the well of Miriam. The mouth of the donkey, right, the talking donkey, like Balaam that we spoke of. The rainbow that God showed to Noah. The manna, which God brought down in the wilderness. The staff of Moses. The shamir, which was some sort of creature in the temple that had something to do, I don't know. The letters of the Torah, of the original Torah scroll, the writing that was on the tablets of stone and the tablets themselves, I think. And some say also the demons, the grave of Moses and the ram of Abraham our father, who he found after the binding of Isaac. And some say also tongues, made with tongues. So one of the things here, at least according to one opinion, is that demons were created at that point, which would mean that it was after Adam. That's in.
Yeah, I guess one last thing I've got on Lilith, and then we'll go on to like other references to her children, as it were. So it says here the Septuagint Greek translates both the reference to Lilith and the word for jackals or wild beasts of the island within the same verse into Greek as, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to do this, onokentauros, apparently assuming them as referring to the same creatures and gratuitously omitting wildcats, wild beasts of the desert. So instead of the wildcats or desert beasts meeting with the jackals, the goat or satyr crying to his fellow, and Lilith or screeching owl resting there. It says here, it is the goat or satyr translated as daimonia, i.e. demons, and the jackals or island beasts as, oh no, centaurs, meeting with each other and crying out to one another. So there she's interchangeable, I guess, with that. Yeah, and there's also some references to Babylonian demonology, but in Deutero-Isaiah, which is, it says, Trader and Moritz Abraham Levi suggest that Lilith was a demon of the night, known also by the Jewish exiles in Babylon. Their view is therefore partly dependent on a later dating of Deutero-Isaiah to the 6th century, and the presence of Jews in Babylon would coincide with references to Hagar. Yeah.
The idea of Deutero-Isaiah is one that I want to dispel, this myth. There's a reason why academics today have decided that the last chapters, the second half of the book of Isaiah, was written much later. It's because it mentions King Cyrus, and atheists don't believe in prophecy. So they've decided that it has to have been written later. Otherwise, they'd have to admit that prophecy exists.
Okay. Well, the thing is, these two guys were 19th century Jews. They were like 1850, 1855.
They were probably Enlightenment people, reformers.
Heretics, you might say, or
yes.
Yeah, burn them, burn witches. Right, so don't do that, obviously. Right, so we've kind of vaguely covered. I've got some points that I'll definitely go off and have a look at. I mean, it's not really that Christmassy when I think of it now, but I find it interesting. I'd like to get onto angels eventually.
All right, then.
And the idea that Lucifer, the angel, frown away.
No, I don't know who he is. That's the thing.
Sure, you've only lived in the West for how long? I mean, obviously, you've never heard of Luke. Anyway, there's an angel reference.
The time I heard of Lucifer was when you mentioned him a few weeks ago.
Wow. Okay, so he is referenced as a light bringer, I think, or light giver, and that's why in the olden days matches were called. The slang word was a Lucifer because you got a light from it, and the morning star. And then he is the angel who becomes Satan after there's a war in heaven in the New Testament, and Michael and his angels cast out Lucifer and his followers, or camp, and then he's also referenced as a dragon, and he is called the accuser of the brethren, a liar from the beginning, a murderer from the first. Like, he's the big bad guy.
Is this in Revelation?
Revelation is I think the war in heaven. Yes.
All right then.
So we'll come back to that. So anyway, right. So in terms of Satan himself or itself, what's the Jewish position, or the main, or the one that you hold to?
So the Jewish position on Satan is that Satan is an angel with a specific purpose. And it's important to note that the word angel in Hebrew is malach, which
Yes.
means messenger or representative. And that is because angels, as I probably mentioned previously, carry the messages of God, and they do missions for God, and that's their entire existence. So Satan, just like any other angel, is a messenger of God. He has a specific mission. Now, his mission is lesoton. That means as a stopper, as an adversary, right? As a stumbling block for man. Right? Now, what's the point of that? The point of that is to try to get is that God wants man to be able to earn his reward, and you can't earn reward if you don't have choice, because that's not called earning. If there's no choice and you're just a robot who just does good all the time, right? Then there's no earning. You've not done anything. You're just a robot. You're doing what you've been programmed to do. So God's given us a choice, as we see in Deuteronomy chapter 30. I put before you life and death, good and bad. Choose life, right? He's given us a choice. And Satan is constantly trying to get us to slip up in order that that we have this choice, right? Satan does a very good job of it. He's an angel who's done a good job of himself, because of
made a good name for himself.
Because of the fallibility of man, that we are so often tempted. Okay, so just as I was listening to you, the Christian perspective on the free will, basically, and like being an automaton, I guess, as opposed to a human being with free will, is still that we can do nothing pleasing to God, basically, because Christians believe that as a result of the curses in Eden, we are fallen from any grace that would save us by grace alone, as it were, until the sacrifice of Christ atones for that. So in the other space, I don't think there's anything outside of God's sovereignty, obviously, but in Job, I don't believe there was an angel created, because I'm Christian. I don't believe that Satan started off with his name, as it were, because God is apt to change people's names depending on their actions and their, like, what's coming for them. But he is expelled, although he has free reign to walk around in heaven, we see in Job. Right. And I think that the fact that he has to kind of, not cajole, but he asks God, like, do you want this wager, basically? Like, can I go and tempt this guy because I hear he's big in the game, and let's see if I can corrupt him. And even though God acquiesces, it's because obviously, ultimately, God knows the end of the story. But I don't know. Can you try and convince me, I guess, as to why God would create somebody who is in obstruction to, like, was it a result of the curse of Eden? Like, I don't. So he had the purpose from prior to man falling. Is that right? I would say so. Yeah. Before man fall, was Satan doing anything? Because you don't believe he was the serpent. Yeah, because he wasn't the serpent. I would assume not. Chilling, waiting to grow into his name, sort of thing. That, or either that, or God created the Satan after the sin. That's also possible. Right. Okay, so he's referenced. So with the king of Tyre, which we briefly touched upon prior to, like, me pressing the button, as it were, I've got an exegesis, a Christian exegesis, obviously, that says, our text says, okay, right. So that's who is Lucifer, blah, 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 blah. Right, king of Tyre, do excuse me. Okay, it says here that some have suggested that these verses may actually be dealing with a human king of Tyre who was empowered by Satan
But the rationale for the conclusion that the later verses of Ezekiel refer to the fall of Lucifer, and the first 10 verses speak about the ruler of Tyre. It says here, many scholars believe that though there was a human ruler of Tyre, the real king of Tyre was Satan, for it was he who was ultimately at work in this anti-God city, and it was he who worked through the human ruler. And therefore the verses 11 onwards that speak about, I think that reference the cherub. Yes, they do. I don't know. Yeah. How would Ezekiel, like, why would he reference a human being as having this different nature and having these different opportunities to have done something differently? Like, do you see what I mean? Like, why berate him? Because he's saying you had this, you had that, you were the glory of, you know, I should read the verse actually, but anyone wondering, it's Ezekiel
chapter 28.
Yes. So if you were to stick to, that's just a guy, a powerful king, a corrupt politician, ruler, what the heck is Ezekiel going on about? Do you know what I mean?
So I have here the main commentary, the main Jewish commentary on the whole of the Hebrew Bible, and also most of the Babylonian Talmud as well, is a commentary called Rashi. You may have heard of him. And he says as follows. So when it says in verse 13, you were in Eden, the garden of God. So Rashi comments as follows: in Eden, the garden of God, with much goodness and pleasure, you enjoy yourself as if you were dwelling in Eden, the garden of God. All wealth, pride, and honor are given to you. All precious stones are set on your raiment. And he continues, he continues, the work of your drums and your orifices. Although I gave you all this honor, I knew that you would become haughty. And I made in you the work of the perforated drums that let out wind with an instrumental sound like a drum. And these are what you should have contemplated about. On the next verse, in verse 14, he explains, you are a cherub of great measure that covers. This means you are a bird of measure, i.e. the huge bird that covers a large sea with his wings, i.e. you rule over a large dominion. The word used with outstretched shielding wings is mimshach hasochich. The word mimshach, he says, is a word for largeness, like in Numbers chapter 13, verse 32, men of stature, which is translated into Aramaic as with this word mishron. And I gave that to you. You are on the mount of the sanctuary of God. And I gave you a place to acquire a name for yourself in the edifice of the mountain of my sanctuary, for you assisted Solomon with the ceder wood. You walked
hold on. Whoa, a point of order, as it were,
Sorry.
Mr. Speaker. But so he's talking to a human being in the time of Ezekiel, and he's saying that this guy who's clearly immortal, he's not Melchizedek, he's not anyone like special, as it were. He's talking about him being on the holy mountain, and it's a different time, like it's a different chronology. Like he would have to be pretty old and pretty well traveled.
I would assume that he's talking about the king of Tyre in general.
The king of Tyre now? You're saying he's talking to the crown rather than the person?
He's talking to the
Tyre is fallen, am I right? It didn't start out as
so at this point, is Tyre fallen? I would assume so.
Yeah, it didn't start out as like
that I'm seeing here is that Ezekiel is talking about Hiram, the king of Tyre, back in the days of Solomon.
Right.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
They would say that, but that's what they say.
The thing is, I'm a little cautious in terms of Jewish commentary, because it's like there are so many different arguments that have gone on that may crop up again. That, do you know what I mean? Like you follow a certain rabbinic school, and then I don't know. Like obviously it happens in all religions, but I wonder that there's only one truth, obviously, but then people are able to make such convincing arguments for stuff. And then if you look at maybe another rabbi, he's got a completely different view. Well, do you find that you, I don't mean to say you would just swallow any information, but do you, the rabbis that you do follow, or the school of thoughts that you follow, is it all kind of laid out already, and then you choose to accept or reject those considered arguments?
So we have a principle called Emunas Chachomim, which basically means loyalty to the sages. So what is it? What this means is, this is an often misunderstood idea. Basically means that we have to, whenever we approach these kind of commentaries of the sages, we have to approach it with tentativeness, with a bit of humility, and realize that we're probably not as holding in all of Scripture and all of the different books as they were, and to not try to get our own personal beliefs into it. We just need to try to understand what it is they're saying and why it is they might be saying that. Whether or not we have to use that as our own personal opinion is probably irrelevant, because our personal opinion is irrelevant when we look at Scripture, because what matters, as you'll hear Rabbi Tovia Singer say a lot, is what God wants, is what God thinks.
Yeah.
So it's not really about what I think. It's not what about the rabbis think. It's about what God thinks. The rabbis are telling us how they interpreted it, and I'm just relaying what they interpreted, because this is considered, because when we look at these things and we're trying to understand them, a good source of information, at least according to Judaism, it's a different argument about rabbinic authority, is to have a look and see what the rabbis have said in the past.
Sure. But do you go initially to the Scripture, and then if you have concerns, go off to the commentaries?
So the best way to do it is to go initially to the Scripture and try to get some sort of understanding, and then have a look to see what the commentaries are saying and try to understand why they're saying what they're saying, because they didn't just talk for nothing. Yes,
that's true. I mean, they do all right out of the talking, though, don't they? To be fair,
they write all these lengthy books and lengthy commentaries and all this stuff, and ink was very expensive back in the day. There's a story told. I don't know if it's true or not. There's a story told about one rabbi known as the Baal HaTurim, who wrote an entire commentary on the 5 books of Moses, with his own blood, because he was in prison he had been imprisoned by the church in Germany or Spain. I can't remember where it was. He had been put in prison, and he wrote out his commentary with his own blood on the walls of the prison, and then he memorized it and wrote it down later.
Nice. I mean, he's committed to the cause, is what you could say. Yes. I guess. Yeah. There's not really any going undercover if you're writing it.
Ink was very expensive back in the day. That's why they often.
I'm not going to make any references to Jews and money at this point. I'm going to say he couldn't get out of his cell to go and purchase some, but potentially he was willing to do so. Right. So, I'm not really sure where I can go with the demonology thing, other than to try and get to Satan. Obviously, Satan isn't a demon. He's never been a demon. He has authority over demons might be a fair assessment. It's not like a God and the angels kind of arrangement, but it's similar, I suppose. But so if Satan is an angel who is created as Satan, how is the worship of idols, which is attributed to demons, does that tie in within the Jewish understanding with Satan? Are they ultimately worshipping Satan because obviously there is no other God, or are they worshipping these actual demons?
Yeah, idols. Right, the demons.
Yeah.
So idolaters. So I've never heard of any rabbi reference, and I've never read any Jewish source that mentions the idea of worshipping Satan. I've never heard of. I mean, I've heard of it because I've heard Christians talk about it, and I've heard about these satanic places, these satanic congregations in America or whatever, where they go around saying we love Satan, which is very odd. No. So when it comes to people worshipping idols, we would say that they are worshipping these demon powers, or these backroot angels, like trying to get around the system, or according to a school of thought that I myself do not follow, but which is worth mentioning, the school of thought of Maimonides, who says that actually all of these things are things that the pagans think have power, but in fact have no power at all, and they're simply worshipping sticks and stones. They're worshipping worshipping the wood, and they're worshipping the stone, which has interesting connotations when you think about what Jews think about other religions.
Yes,
definitely. The wood and the stone.
I know, I got exactly the passive aggressive. No, I'm joking. I got what you're saying. Yes, it's unfortunately not.
It wasn't only a knock on Christianity.
The very thought that you would do so is shocking to me. What I have is an Old Testament reference. All right, where's it gone? Okay, so Chronicles 21:1. It says,
yes.
Satan rose up against Israel and incited David to take a census of Israel.
Yes, one of my favorites.
And it says here, as we saw before, it was probably not Satan himself, but one of his demons that whispered in David's ear, the dangerous idea of the census, because the first part of the article is showing that because of God's sovereignty, his agents, both like Malak, both human and non-human, it's ultimately attributed to him. But in some instances within the Bible, you see an agent, like when an angel comes and I don't know, for example, Zechariah, no, that's New Testament, it doesn't matter. Zechariah is caused to be struck down by Gabriel because of his wavering faith. And therefore we know that that's not the power of Gabriel, that's like he's working God's will, as it were.
Right. Yes, of course. When you look at when you mention First Chronicles 21:1, so it's always helpful to compare, because whenever you look at Chronicles, it's always very interesting to compare with Samuel and Kings, the corresponding verses. So the corresponding verse to First Chronicles 21:1 is 2 Samuel 24:1, which is the last chapter of 2 Samuel. And over there it says that God incited this sin. And of course, in Chronicles, it says it was Satan. And as you correctly identified, this is because Satan is doing the mission of God to do it. So ultimately, it is practically speaking, who's doing it? It's Satan. But Satan is only a messenger of God, and therefore it's attributed as God doing it.
But that's where Christians differ.
Yeah, that's where we differ.
From their Jewish counterpart, adherence to the one true God, as it were, because we believe that there is none good. None good but God. God is only goodness. Like he doesn't, he's not a man that he should lie. He's he can't have sin in his presence. All of those like attributes. He's got sovereignty over all things. Jeremiah 29:11, like he knows the plans. And in Romans 8:28, all things work to the good of those who are called according to his purpose. So he can bring goodness out of any evil or the absence of good, even, because that's not really evil, but just where there are no good people to bring about his truth. But apart from the instance of Job, I mean, he wasn't involved in the plans of Satan. Like, still Lucifer or Satan was the architect of that exchange with Job, and obviously God brought goodness out of it, because through Job, or to Job, he was able to tell the rest of the people who were going to read that book all the things about him that were glorious and deserving of worship, as opposed to when, like how you could interact with your surroundings if you presumed there was no God. And that's my ultimate aim in speaking about demons and angels, because they are spoken about so often. I have concern for people who don't believe in them as a reality, because God has for sure said they are there, like, and so did Christ, and lots of different Old Testament and New Testament writers. So Christians don't believe that God sets forth there is something in the, actually I'm fibbing, there is something in the Old Testament where God acknowledges that he is the creator of, but I as a Christian take that to mean he's the creator of Lucifer or Satan, and therefore he's not I don't believe he's the source of the evil. I think one of his creation is the source of that evil.
But surely if God is the creator of the so-called source of evil, then
Yeah.
that means that God is the source of evil.
No. Sorry, maybe I should clarify, like linguistically. I believe that similarly to Adam, God already knows the outcomes of all the free will choices, but that he desires, his initial desire was that mankind would not fall from grace, that Satan would not rebel, that there would be no war in hell. Like, I'm not saying it can go against his express wish, but what he desires for us is never ever what we do, because we're ridiculous. Like, we're sinful to the point of, our own destruction in the face of God. Moses like had doubts when God was speaking to him, like the God of the universe is telling him, just go and do this, it'll all be fine, let's not worry about it, off you go. He's got more questions, he's like doubtful and insecure, which is fine. But yeah, human beings are innately sinful in the Christian worldview, so that doesn't mean that God prompts us to be sinful. He's not causing, the absence of God is the cause of sin. In fact, it would be the opposite. If you don't have God, like if you're not indwelt by the Holy Spirit, or you don't have access to God, you can only be sinful. Any love or care Paul speaks about, he says even thieves have a care for each other, even murderers are decent with each other. What's the good of just loving, like love in and of itself, if it's not from God? I'm ranting now. So that's my answer. I don't think God plans. He has the ultimate plans for everything, and because he can bring goodness out of anything, even a void, he accounts for the presence of evil. And so there's a deficit, and then he credits the account as and when he chooses or sees fit through prophets and etc.
So that's very interesting. The Jewish view is quite different, obviously, which is that there is nothing which is innately evil, and there's nothing that is innately good. Everything can be used for good or can be used for evil, and anything can become good or can become evil.
What about the human heart?
We do not believe that Satan is innately evil, nor do we believe that the demons are innately evil. Interestingly, if you look at various rabbinic passages that talk about these harmful spirits, in, for example, Tractate Brochus, page 5a or b, where it talks about the various types of mischief that these harmful spirits cause, it doesn't really sound evil. It seems more like some sort of mischief that causing
celestial trolling
types of what would you call it, minor inconveniences to people, and minor inconveniences to people are a way of God trying to get people on track, right? If you the rabbis teach, the sages teach that if you put your hand in your pocket to take out a certain amount of coins, and you take out less than the amount of coins that you wanted to take out, then that is already what's called Yisurin. That's already a type of interference enough that it could atone for some sort of sin that you may have done. Any type of inconvenience or any type of trouble or distress, or sickness that you may have in your life, so we believe is this idea of God trying to bring, of God allowing you some sort of atonement in this world from some sort of sin, which is part of the idea of bad things happening to good people.
So
which is
obviously Christians would reject that, like wholesale, because there's no reason for any atonement other than Christ. It's the clue is in the title kind of thing. But I'm happy to accept that God has sovereignty. I don't believe that God would send, I don't think he's a micromanager in that if you just pull out the wrong, do you know what I mean? Like to inconvenience people. No, I don't. I could describe it to demons, but I think that somewhat takes away from the free will aspect of the result of Eden is that human beings can choose. And the Bible tells me, at least, that the heart is desperately wicked, because I can't remember if it's Old Testament or New Testament. That's why I said it just tells me that. But yeah, it's desperately wicked above all else. And who can know it? I.e. God can know it. Yahweh and Christ, actually, old and new, are said to search the hearts and minds of men. and the heart is desperately wicked. Christ tells us that he gives us a new heart of flesh as opposed to the heart of stone. And I don't know if that's a reference to the Mosaic tablets as well, because he says like the laws will be written onto your heart, as opposed, like the law of the spirit as opposed to the law of, you know, the law, as it were. So I think
the idea
free
of
will has to play a part in inconvenience. Like if you err from God's plan, you will find, even if you go towards God's plan for you, actually, satanically or demonically, you will come against interference in that respect. I'm not just going to the shops and pulling out the wrong credit card or like that. I guess is, I don't know. I find that a little bit puzzling because we have agency. We don't need to ascribe misfortune to supernatural entities when we are good enough at mucking everything up ourselves. Like just look at the Israelites when Moses came down. They're already, it's just unbelievable. Sometimes you're just like, can you not wait until God's gone again? But yeah.
Well, so there's a lot there to unpack. So first of all, the idea of the heart of stone and the heart of flesh, that is an idea that is at least kind of based upon various passages, most notably Jeremiah chapter 31 and Ezekiel chapter 36. That talk about that, but that's really more of a different subject about the nature of the new covenant, about what was deficient in the old and what's going to be different in the new, and that is a different debate between Judaism and Christianity for another time, and that is a long debate that can be had. But with regards to what else did you say? With regards to
us having free will and agency and being able to
yes.
call their own.
So with regards to the idea we have agency, God's not micromanaging everything we do. I think that's what you said. Yes. So Judaism would definitely agree with part of that, but disagree with the other part. I.e., we would believe, and this is brought out explicitly in one of the more modern Jewish books, Michtov Me'Eliyahu, but he's really just bringing out old ideas that were never fully clarified in such clear writing, which was that when it comes to the idea of free will, of agency, of man, how do we reconcile this against God's omniscience, right? So we believe that when we make a choice that is not just a mundane choice, not a choice that has no deep significance, it is a choice that God has chosen to take himself out of that particular situation. God is allowing the choice to take place without him interfering in that. However, and that, by the way, seems to be part of the difference between when Pharaoh's heart was not hardened and when it was hardened in Exodus.
Yeah,
obviously. But when it comes to mundane choices we make, or seeming coincidences that happen in our lives, or inconveniences that happen, or distress, or these kind of things, so we believe that is all coming from God, either via a messenger or directly, and everything has a reason. We believe that literally everything that happens, there's a specific reason why God has made that happen, and generally speaking, you can identify that those inconveniences that happen to you are a message from God saying, either this is some sort of atonement for a sin that you did, or it is some sort of message from God saying, you need to up your game. Basically, you need to do better in some sort of area, and you need to try to take something from it. And of course, that's a very difficult thing to do. You need to be on the level to be able to take a message out of every little thing that happens in your day, and that's a very difficult thing to do, a very high level to be on. But that is what we aim for, hopefully.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the live chat. Cherokee, bless her. She's just raised a point that I'm going to kind of expand upon. So within a conversation about demons, demonic interference, the fallen state of man, like all of this stuff, the nature of sin in the Old Testament, I would propose is a direct contravention of the law. The New Testament at least says that before the law was given, there was sin, but no one will be held accountable for it because they couldn't be convicted of their sin because there was no legal process or no, you know, literally top 10 rules and the other like 603. So what is the Jewish perspective on that? Is like, so sin has to, I guess, a Christian theologian called Lewis, he wrote some books about demonic interference in very mundane stuff in order to win the soul to hell, because you referenced earlier like little inconveniences and, you know, maybe why would God do that? I guess from another book that I've been reading recently, a fiction book, the demon says that he created the M25 motorway in order to have low-level frustration and irritation on thousands upon thousands of humans. They then go home and take it out on their wives and their cat and their, you know, and it just spreads out exponentially, this bad vibe, propensity to badness because of this small irritation. So I can accept that the way that God has an overall plan, there is some benefit to demons, I guess, or evil or sin. Like, no, sin, we're the sinful ones, but yeah, to just put a stone in the shoe of anyone. Any saint can be just like pulled off the road, as it were. I don't know where I was going with that. Yeah, so sin. Do Jews believe that people before Moses brought down the tablets are going to be convicted or needed to atone? I mean, those who died before it was, you know.
So we do believe that that already from the time of Noah we have the 7 Noahide laws that we believe God gave to Noah, this covenant with the rainbow. And what was so whenever you have a covenant, you have 2 sides, and you also have a sign. So the sign was the rainbow. God's side was, I'm not going to destroy the world with a flood again. And what was the people's side? The people's side was basically don't murder, don't steal, don't do sexual immorality, don't take limbs off of living animals, establish courts of justice.
So what was missing? Just out of interest.
Sorry?
So you have 7 Noahide and the top 10 Mosaic, as it were, like the big
613
ones.
Commandments.
No, but I mean the 10 Commandments. Yeah, so the 7 Noahide and the, just because I'm pretty sure that all of those 7 were replicated within the Mosaic. But what's the deficit between the 10 and the 7 at least? Like, so you mentioned no killing.
No killing.
Setting up laws is not dishonoring parents. Like, so what's kind of
so the first commandment, of course, is I am the Lord your God. Right, that's of course the command to be loyal to God, to be faithful to God. That is not one of the 7 Noahide laws.
I think it's pretty obvious. If you're the only human being left, you, your 3 sons, the wife, like yeah, we know it's you because he's just demonstrated his absolute authority.
So we believe that the 7 Noahide laws to this day are incumbent upon all mankind, and the Sinai covenant is merely is kind of like an upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit oversimplified, a bit cocky.
Do you have to pay a higher tariff? I mean,
no, you have it much easier than us.
Well, I don't have it any. It's not about the ease, which is just that I don't have any spotless lamb at all, apart from Christ. If you see what I mean, there is no.
I'm talking about in Jewish theology. In Jewish theology, a Gentile has to do a lot less in order to go to the Jewish kind of heaven. We don't really have a heaven, but whatever it is
and
that we
I
have.
would suggest lovingly to you, as it were, and in all good faith, that may be because of the poor behavior of the Israelites and God's desire to just irk them a little bit by, inviting Gentiles in, as it were, to the arrangement, like making.
I don't think that's anything to do with it, because a Gentile.
Well, it's easier if you're not. My argument would be if Paul is right and those before the Mosaic law are not accountable, anyone outside of that covenant initially, i.e. Gentiles, is also not convicted by that sin. If that is God's law and you are ignorant of that law because you're not of Israel, then you're not going to be convicted of it. If you're then adopted into Israel under the new covenant, then you become responsible for it, sure, and things would be a lot harder if you fall from grace or are severed from Christ, which is spoken about in Galatians. But other than that, you're not doing any atoning in and of yourself. You can't work towards it. You can't make God love you more or less. You can only, be washed by the sacrifice that's already been given. So
of course, Jewish theology is completely opposed to that
radically different.
idea,
Yeah.
radically opposed to that, and that is a debate for another time. That's huge.
Okay, so
the
yeah. All right, so
Um,
we could debate the religions at some stage in the future.
that's
What I'm going to do is ask somebody, and I feel remiss for not remembering now. Somebody wanted to ask you a question about the Talmud. So if you're still watching, apologies, but you can, if anyone's got any question for either Josh or I, you can just type question, hopefully in capital letters because I don't have my glasses on, and then let me know what the question is. And then other than that, we'll be wrapping up in maybe 10 minutes or so. So I guess I could scroll back a bit. Oh, actually, he didn't reference the question. He just said, I have a question. Yeah, it just says, can I ask a question about the Talmud? So,
oh, right.
yeah.
Oh, there it
is. Some people are very humorous in the chat. All right, so anyone with a question? Otherwise, I'll just make up a question. Oh, Josh, do you have any questions whilst we're waiting about Christianity that are not too polemical?
Not really, no. Nothing that would spark, nothing that wouldn't spark a huge debate, which I don't really have time for.
Shocker! Spoiler alert: Jews argue. Okay, right. So, what's the Jewish view on exorcism?
Exorcism,
and that's from S. Sam.
What's exorcism?
Exorcism is the casting out of demons from a human host. Possession is when you're taken over by demonic forces, and then
so we do have a concept similar to that. It's called the concept of a dibuk. A dibuk is some sort of spirit that takes over a human body, and I don't know how they get rid of a dibuk, but I do know that there are stories of rabbis from the past who had to deal with getting a dibuk out of people. There's a famous story from Radin in Lithuania from the late 19th century or the early 20th century with a great rabbi who lived in Radin called the Chofetz Chaim, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, who the townsmen, the Jews, brought him a case where there was a young woman who had been taken over by a dibuk, and she had been completely possessed and she'd gone mad, and he basically was able to speak to the dibuk, and he found out that this was a trapped spirit of a dead person.
Ghost possession.
Yeah, who had taken over her body, and needed some sort of thing in order to go away. I can't remember how he got. I don't know how he got rid of it, but he did. Yeah. That's the story, anyway.
So in the New Testament, Christ casts out demons into a herd of swine at one point, and they rush off and commit suicide, as it were. And there's the speech of demons in the New Testament. We'll maybe get to that another time. They identify themselves as a multiple entity, I guess. He says, his name is Legion, for they are many. With, I suppose, ghost possession. I hope that answers your question, Sam. I'm not it sounds pretty similar to the churches. I mean, exorcism is usually performed by a member of the clergy. There are certain prayers that are used as standard to not necessarily bind, but to abjure, I guess. I don't know, command the demon to, more Airbnb than squatters, just sort of leave now, and maybe it'll be fine. I'm not really sure because I'm not a priest. So, any other questions? Yeah, dibuk. I will look into that word actually. Okay, so I'm not. Okay, Some things are called unclean for you. I guess he's talking to you because he references food, and Mark chapter 7 says that's not the case for me. Are some things unclean for God? There's an emotion of disgust. The land vomited them out. So are like unclean as in
impure,
repellent, I guess, yeah, or yeah, not to be tolerated. I would say sin is unclean for God.
I mean,
If that's not too obvious.
I mean, it depends what it means by unclean, and of course, unclean to a human is not the same as unclean to God. But I would suppose that sin would probably be up there. If you could say that there was something unclean to God, then it would probably be sin.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both agree God can't be defiled, as it were, like as in his essence, but for sure the Bible says he it's not that he cannot be in the presence of sin, it's that sin cannot be in the presence of him. So because he is good, like goodness, he's morally excellent, perfect in all his ways, etc. I feel a hallelujah coming on, but I'll quell it, not to worry. So one question on the Talmud, please, Jib. So you can ask a question, please do, and then we're going to wrap up. So
is he going to ask it?
He's typing diligently, I guess, as we speak. Hopefully.
Right.
I think he's the original person, or he or she.
He is.
I just suspended them, yeah. Okay. All right, someone's just referencing when Jesus cast out the demons, it says he never touched anyone. Yeah, I don't think he had to. The priests don't generally lay on hands. That's more, I don't know. All right, so if there's a question on the Talmud, can I ask a question? The question, I don't really. Okay. We'll give it a couple of seconds.
Messiahs, Ben Joseph and David. Yes, I do. I do believe in both Messiahs.
Yeah, that was referenced in our earlier conversation. Maybe we'll pick up on that for sure in the future.
So JC said that he wants to do an online debate between me and Paperboy about the two Messiahs. So that's finally.
Okay, and was that so? You didn't just
we didn't do it because he didn't come to the park. So
yeah, shocking bad form. I think it denotes a lack of. No, I'm joking. I'm sure there was a good reason.
I'm sure he has something better to do.
Lockdown nonsense. So Jib hasn't asked his question. I'm just going to throw it out for the record. I don't believe in two messiahs, obviously. Like Brian to me. Yeah. Right. Here we go. Tractate. Yeah, it might be the little symbol I've got that gives it away around my neck.
Please,
okay,
you
can read that.
Stated a proselyte who was under.
Do you want to read it out loud so that?
Okay, so Jib has said, Tractate Yubamoth says, folio 60b, Rav Shimon ben Yochai stated, a proselyte who is under the age of 3 years and 1 day is permitted to marry a priest. Do you accept this? Well, I would have to look at the context and see what exactly it's talking about, because marriage in the sense that that the Talmud talks about is not the same as marriage that we talk about. And the idea of minors getting married in the Talmud is not the same idea that people would think of marriage today. It's
like a betrothal or
it's more of it's kind of like a preparation for marriage, but which the girl is allowed to terminate whenever she wants, basically. And they're not allowed to have relations unless she initiates, but she's not allowed to be pressured. There's a whole bunch of laws.
3 years and 1 day, I would suggest that.
So basically,
could be withholding a dummy, and that's
so basically the rule basically was that if you had an orphan girl who was going to be left to wander the streets and be picked up by strangers, so it was better that she was with somebody who was righteous, and the righteous person would take care of her until she was old enough to choose for herself what she wanted to do.
So it was like a placeholder kind of thing.
Basically, that was basically what this idea was.
So I'm asking, it was like a placeholder. It was just like a provisional,
Yeah.
So Jib says he did look at that, whatever you asked him to. It says, where is Jesus right now in the Talmud? That's from Threshing Floor. I'm not sure if... Yeah.
So there's actually debate about whether or not Jesus is even mentioned in the Talmud. I would argue that he's not mentioned in the Talmud in any of the places where most people think he is mentioned. There are places where he is hinted to when they talk about the heretics, a specific blessing that was made about the heretics in Tractate Brochus. So there it does reference him, but in none other places does it talk about him. And the reference the threshing floor is talking about is a place where it talks about a certain person who is said to be boiling an excrement, but there is no evidence whatsoever that that's talking about Jesus. And I've not heard any rabbis who think that that is talking about Jesus. All I've heard is...
You also think, correct me if I'm wrong, you also think that no one can know his name, so it would be difficult to directly reference him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we don't know what Jesus' Hebrew name was. A lot of early rabbis used to refer to him as Yeshu, not because they thought that was his name, because it was a derogatory thing. Yeshu is an acronym that stands for Yamach Shemo V'Zichrono, which means may his name and memory be blotted out. So that's what they used to call it.
Is there a Yah in there? Is there a YAH in the anglicized version of that spelling?
It's 3 letters. Yud, Shin.
No, the longer thing that you just said, the condensed insult thing.
Shemo V'Zichrono. It's completely different from God's name. Completely different.
I was just double checking that you weren't all going to be boiling in certain fecal matter. Okay, so on that very Christmassy, happy, like weird note. Okay, there's one more question from Jib, and then I'm going to put my foot down. Okay, so Jib, type like your life depends on it as well. Okay, no, that's Open Secrets. Okay, so Open Secrets talked to a rabbi who believed it was Jesus, and she said, yeah. Okay, so he believed in both. He did not believe in both.
Right, so Open Secrets, I don't know which rabbi you're talking to, because all rabbis believe in both messiahs. That is something that is very clear in the Talmud, and any rabbi who believes that the Talmud has authority will tell you that there are 2 messiahs.
Okay, so Cherokee says, Jewish Christians value the connection between the Old Testament sacrificial rituals and the crucifixion of Yeshua. Given that, can you explain the red heifer sacrifice on the Mount of Olives?
The red heifer sacrifice on the Mount of Olives?
You know about it. Is it?
I mean, I don't believe the red heifer sacrifice was done on the Mount of Olives. I don't know much about the red heifer because I haven't learnt about it. There's a tractate all about the laws of the red heifer, based upon, which is an elaboration of the laws given in Numbers chapter something or other. I can't remember the chapter. There is a tractate called Maseches Parler, which means the tractate of the cow. Nothing to do with the Muslims' second surah by that name. But although they are both referring to the same cow, oddly, because the cow they talk about in their Quran is the same cow that we're talking about.
They have the habit of scripture.
But I mean, when you say Jewish Christians, so you may as well say Jewish
Jews.
It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
Who else is talking here?
So Jib again has asked the question, which is, can I ask a question? Just ask away, because I'm going to give it like a couple more minutes. Open Secrets is qualifying that it was a Dutch rabbi, some sort of internet, talked about the Messiah ben David and said it was not obligatory to believe in the both of them. So what are the qualifiers for Judaism? I mean, because it's a bloodline, nothing's obligatory, I guess, but religiously, are there the core tenets that you must accept?
So the core tenets that we're supposed to accept are the 13 principles of faith, although one of them is a little bit iffy with at least one early rabbi. But with regards to
double jeopardy,
whether or not there's an obligation to believe in both Moshiachs. So I wouldn't say there's an obligation to believe in both, but I would say that there's an obligation to believe in the authority of the Talmud, because there's an obligation to believe in the authority of the sages, and the Talmud.
Is it a deal breaker? Because certain rabbinic schools disbelieve, have contentions within.
So somebody who does not believe in the authority of the rabbis is called an apikoros. That's one of the types of heretics that you can have.
How can you believe in two different rabbis who have two different views about the same subject? You must disbelieve one of their exegesis.
Well, it's quite simple. The authority of the rabbis does not mean that you have to say that the rabbis are in agreement or that they're saying the same thing. What it means, we have a principle that a lot of people don't understand, and I've tried to explain to Paperboy a few times, but I still don't think he understands it yet, because he keeps saying things that make me think otherwise, but that's a different subject. There's a concept called Shivim Panim LaTorah and Eilu V'Eilu Devei Chaim. Shivim Panim LaTorah means there are 70 faces to the Torah. The 70 faces to the Torah, i.e., can be understood in 70 ways, even with, and Eilu V'Eilu Devei Chaim, these and these are words of the living God. What does this mean? This means that all of these different opinions in a metaphysical way are in fact true, although we as human beings can only handle one truth, which is why in Judaism we have no problem with the idea that we have different schools of thought. We don't consider people, most people do not consider people who follow other schools of thoughts within Judaism as heretics, because we know that they have what to rely upon, and that those are also true in a metaphysical sense, and that they're allowed to follow that in a physical sense, and we're allowed to follow a different one in the physical sense, and that's fine.
Okay, we just have one truth, Jesus Christ. So that's quite an easy answer for me. But Jim is asking quite an unsavory question. If you want to look,
just finishing off the answer to Open Secret's question. So as for two messiahs, there is no argument amongst the rabbis that there will be two messiahs. That's all that is agreed upon by all, as far as I know. Therefore, I would say that to not believe that, I don't know why somebody would not believe that and call himself a rabbi, because it's very explicit in the Talmud.
Do you fancy going towards a question that involves bestiality or not? I mean,
his question. Yeah, I can see his question. Well, that is one of the opinions. It's not all of the opinions. That is one of the opinions in the Talmud. I have learned that before, because Rashi quotes that in his commentary to Genesis. So I do know there's two opinions. There's one opinion that he literally had intercourse with all these different animals. He tried,
for anyone who can't see the line,
each, and found that none of them were right for him, which is why the verse then says he did not find a partner,
suitable companion. Yeah.
So that's how that's deduced. There's another opinion that says no, he didn't do that.
Well, I'd go with that one myself.
He did not do that, but he didn't do it physically, but rather he tried to establish some sort of connection with these animals, but realized that he could not.
For companionship, though, it's literally no suitable helper and companion. So on that bombshell, because I can't believe that's pretty left field, to be honest. I mean, it could account for Lilith and I don't know. We've just done a full circle, but no, I'm going to go with no, because Genesis uses a rarely used reference to knowledge, as it were, like Adam knew Eve, and then along comes baby number one, and baby number two after he knew her a bit better. But he didn't know the animals one by one. He was just with them and named them. And
so these are two different opinions. These are two different opinions. Take your pick.
Like I say, wholeheartedly on the side of no. He didn't know. He didn't know the difference between good and evil at that point. But I don't think he was that gullible. But anyway, that's my opinion. Okay, so
wasn't yet evil.
Well, let's not start up another debate. But you said. Well, the thing is, you said to me before that Adam's motivation in partaking of the fruit was so he could prove himself more righteous. But I think I did suggest to you that if he didn't know the difference between good and evil at that point, why would he be trying to, I don't know, it seems to me an odd position to take. You're the only human. You can't compare yourself to others and say, I'm not pleasing enough to God. Do you know what I mean? You're already perfect.
That's not really what I meant when I said that. What I was saying was that because the principle of earning your reward, and God wants to reward the human beings. So in order to earn reward, it's much better to earn if you have an inner fight. So it's a much greater service of God to, at least in Adam's eyes, Adam's pre-sin eyes, to earn,
go against God's
to try to earn with in a struggle than to earn with an outer struggle. And where he went wrong was, well, God told you not to do that, so you shouldn't try to make your own calculations like this.
Yeah. Ezra, you can ask one quick question. And just while, I don't buy that at all. I know you're not selling it, but I don't buy it. No, because we're told that Eve is the one who succumbed anyway. So Eve would have had to have the inner machinations of, I'm going to impress God even more. And it says that, and God saw that it was good. And for God, who is one of the definitions of good, is moral excellence and perfection. So God saw that it was good. He didn't show any displeasure in Adam. He didn't imply that, he didn't send any little demonic influences to miscount his change. Like, he didn't have any pockets, obviously. The point is that, I don't see what would have spurred him onto this, other than maybe some lizard who could talk, like just sniffing around on his legs. So Ezra, the last question is for you, Josh.
I'm not explaining Daniel 9. I have.
No, that's a pretty big question, Ezra.
That is a massive question. I'm not explaining Daniel 9. I have to have supper because then I've got a learning arrangement with somebody in about 26 minutes.
Excellent.
About half an hour away.
Roughly 26 minutes.
I'm going to have to stop now.
All right. So everyone in the chat, thanks ever so much for watching, listening, liking, subscribing, sharing, repenting, praying regularly, worshipping the one true God, etc. Anyone who doesn't get on board quickly, because no one knows when he's coming back. And other than that, thanks ever so much, Josh. I hope you enjoy your evening. I've kept you over time, and I apologize for that. Will you? Yeah. Are you going to be around on Sunday?
Yeah. That's fine.
Excellent. All right. We'll continue this in the freezing cold. Excellent. All right then. So I have no idea how to end the stream. Yes, I do. Brilliant. I just saw the button.
Right.
So, all right. God bless.
Subscribe to both Kay and my channel.
Yes. What's your channel name? Just let me know, or let everybody.
Jews at the Corner. Please like and subscribe when I put this on the channel.
Excellent. All right. Well, send me the link and I'll put it out in a little post or whatever. All right. So I'm going to end the broadcast. Josh, you'll still be there, but these people won't. So God bless you, and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.